At the age of 11 years old, my father was brutally murdered in Dominican Republic. And that's when I kind of woke up. To that point, I wasn't really living. I was just on autopilot, kind of drifting away. I'm a child, but I was not really conscious of my actions, not conscious of what I was doing. And in a blink of an eye, I became a man. It was just like, now my mother was illegally here in the country. I had two younger brothers and sisters, an older brother who um was figuring his life out. And so I started asking myself the question, why? Like, why me? Why, if I have everything that I need, I had the Jordans, I'll go to, the nice school, play baseball, all that good stuff. I'm like, now kind of my life was shattered, but why? I haven't done anything wrong. Why me? And so at the age of 12, I just went into discovery about myself. And from there, just the hustle grew. I knew what I wanted in life. I knew what I had to do. And so I just started working really hard. At the age of 13, 14, I was already selling chocolates at school. I was, when people would cut and do the hookies and go to the beach or whatnot, I would get my mom to make some empanadas, and we'll pack up the little cooler with some Capri Suns, and I'll head out to the beach just to sell them for $1. Power bands for baseball. The point is that I was out there, and in that in that environment, I ended up starting to read books. I started to kind of reforge my life and kind of build the person that you see today, Brian Kartahena. Um, and yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the base and the foundation of my story. Ever since then, I had to deal with a lot more adversity, because we all know that adversity is kind of that that point that drives you forward. So yeah, I've been blessed to have figured life out to some extent, and that's thanks to all the adversity that I had to go through. My father dying was the biggest blessing of my life, because that's who made me who I am today. That event is what kind of forged who Brian is today. So
Yeah, man. Man, there's a lot there to unpack, right? Like you could have just easily fell back into the being a statistic. Father was a drug dealer, passed away, grew up in the hood. You know what I mean, and just thrown it away. But you shifted and said, "Nah, you know what? I'm not gonna go into this victim role. I'm not a victim of my circumstances and conditions. They don't control my destiny. I control my destiny." So what was the shift? What, because you went through the times where you kept saying why me on your pity pot on your victim role. Where did that shift?
so I think that that's an important question when you ask why. I think it didn't come necessarily from a victim mentality. It was more like trying to uncover um the deep the deep truth, because essentially I knew that there was a purpose behind the madness. And I don't know, maybe I was just born that way, but I've always looked for why.
Okay.
Why? So when I say why me, it was more like, okay, I know that there's a lesson to learn here. What's that lesson?
There we go.
And I started finding the blessings in that tragedy. I realized that I was meant to be this man that I am today. I was meant to kind of take a hold of my family. I was meant to grow into more. And if growing up with a quote unquote drug dealing father, and him passing away would have just kind of kept me there. And so God needed to do what he needed to do in order for me to do what I needed to do. And so that question why is a question that I challenge everybody to ask themselves when there's a moment of tragedy, when there's a moment of hurt, when there's pain that you feel. You ask why. It's never for no reason. And you mentioned story. I think that one of the things that we do learn, one of the things that I do train people on is shifting their story. And so I think that as long as you have the right belief system and the right mindset, again, me understanding that everything happens for a purpose, then I could build a better story. And so I forged that story to make it make sense for what I wanted to accomplish.
Absolutely, because the story you tell yourself is what shapes and creates your destiny, right? So, um, so what happens after, your father passes away, you have this mindset change. What happens next?
So again, I started kind of finding ways to be valuable at an early age. And I say valuable to my family, most importantly. And I started hustling. I use the word hustling from New York. So I started, I started making money, and that's kind of where my life was focused. And I developed a lot of skills in sales. I developed a lot of skills in just progressing financially. And I thought that I had life figured out. At the age of 23, I was already making six figures. I was helping my mom, already kind of taking control of my whole environment, my family. I had some good friends, and life hit me again, because it always happens. And I was in a motorcycle accident going over 140 miles an hour. I completely shattered my leg. I had 21 broken, 7 bones broken in 21 different places. I had a quadricep tendon rupture. My life was literally shattered. I was in bed rest, and at that point, I realized that there was no amount of money that, or no amount of success or financial success, that was going to assist me when I was laying in a hospital bed for 4 months. And so that was another major shift in my life, where I understood the power of our body, the power of our physiology, how to take care of the one temple that we have. And so I went, and that led me to a new path. And I started focusing on not only working out, but more importantly, just my health in general. And I started seeing the synchronicity between your body, your mind, and your soul. So I had already kind of worked on my mind a lot. At that point, I had already started reading books. Already attended a handful of Tony events, and now I started working on my body, and I just felt like I felt connected to something deeper. And so I started going to, I guess you could call it a spiritual journey, soul searching, whatever it is. And that's when I really found my mojo, and I really found out who I was.